Welcome back, my people. This is the Road to CA podcast, the show for aspiring chartered accountants to inspire, empower, and inform the difference makers of tomorrow. Guys, today we're joined by a green and gold-blooded entrepreneur. But you might not know him. You might know him though. Old School. Have you ever heard of it? Okay, maybe not. But maybe you know a guy named Dricus du Plessis? Okay, maybe not. Well, Old School they've partnered with Dricus, who is UFC middleweight world champion as of this recording. Of course, fingers crossed for 9 February. Okay, now. Do you know the Springboks? Oh, goodness. If you don't know the Springboks, now there's no saving you. Old School has recently just partnered with the Springboks even. And Old School is the brand behind the most quality and iconic aspirational supporters wear and leisure wear in the country at the moment, and one day soon Africa. We're joined by the founder of Old School, guys. Yes, he is a CA, but not just any CA though. He is a 2024 SAICA Top 35under35 finalist, winner of the impact category through his incredible work being done there at Old School. Most importantly, he's a lover of wines, a lover of sports, and all things startups and business. He's still hungry, he's still thriving and striving. We are joined by Daneel Steinmann. Dan, how are you, man?
Man, thank you so much for having me. It's so good being here and just having a good discussion for you. And thanks for the kind words.
True words, Dan. I have to add that. It's not like
Yes.
I lie at all in any of my intros. And I'm so excited about this conversation because many aspiring CAs are aspiring entrepreneurs. And what your story is
Yes.
really going to show us is that you don't have to be. You can be an entrepreneur, even as you
Yes.
are developing. Yes, you don't have to drop your studies or start a huge venture, but you can start really putting that hunger into something. Express
Yes.
yourself. And I think your story and your perspective is just a great example of that. Let's go back, rewind to when the whole CA thing began for you.
So I think I remember when I sort of at high school, I always it's crazy, but you're almost like coming from a school like Porus. It's almost as if when you choose your subjects in grade 10, you almost already make the choice of, in what direction you want to go. So I think that's sort of when the decision came. I think I always knew I had a passion for business. I think I was quite natural, like drawn to entrepreneurship. And sort of, at least from my dad's friends, the most successful ones were CAs, So I think that's what inspired me to be a CA. I think I think as time went on, even the CA journey changed to what it means to be a CA, or at least a fresh CA. I think, when I went to go article, the whole concept of articling outside of public practice at like anything outside of maybe Investec or Netbank was sort of quite absurd, or sort of seen as being risky. I think
Yeah.
people were like, but I think there was so much wording revolving like the buzzword of like what it means to have a big four on your CV, and like the opportunities for going international with it. I sort of stuck to my gut against a lot of opinions, and went to VAT-IT, which is sort of a regulation tech group, which sort of specializes in quite a variety of businesses, not necessarily VAT at all. And I think that's probably one of the best decisions I made for my personal career. I think I was in university, I was quite strong academically, very competitive. I sort of always wanted to be, placing close to the top in the year, sort of always trying to chase down prizes that I actually didn't end up receiving. But yeah, I think I was a strong chartered account, like strong academically, but I wasn't actually passionate about it. I think my dad always says you don't define a strength at something that you're good at, but something that makes you feel strong. And I felt much stronger in like the business side than necessarily any technical work. Although I was able to do it quite above expectation, I'd say. that IT was a great learning curve for me. I think it's almost like playing Monopoly uh, for business, so you got to play it without your own cash on the line. I had a
Yeah.
lot of learnings. I think a lot of good learnings, but also took away of what I didn't like. And yeah, I think it sort of equipped me quite well to ensure that the culture we create at Old School and what we stand for and how we do things are a bit different, so that we are able to, sort of nurture and keep great talented people. So yeah, that's sort of been the journey. And yeah, I only qualified in end of 2024 theoretically. I got quite early, luckily, sign off. And it's been sort of about a 16 to 18-month period full time in Old School, and I haven't looked back.
Sure. Sure. I want to zero in on that quote from your father. I think it's an incredible one. A strength isn't a strength is what makes you feel strong.
Yes.
So that sort of reminds me of a little bit of this conversation of passion, which I think is just too obscure.
Yeah.
I don't think the word passion is a nice word that we use, but I'm thinking more of there is what you're good at, but then there's
Yes.
also what you value, right? And
Yes.
you mentioned how in VetIT you got to know more of what you didn't like. So
Yes.
I read this book in 2023. I think it's a book that every single aspiring professional should read called Managing
Yeah.
Oneself by Peter Drucker. Basically, it's about how
Yeah.
to lead your life as a knowledge worker, right? And the first three questions that no one asks entering the professional world that are crucial are: what are your strengths? What are your values? And how do you work?
Mm.
I want to ask you on in terms of the balance between that what you are good at
Mm.
and what makes you feel strong. I want to ask you, like, what do you think? Because I don't think it's all about what makes you feel
No.
strong. You know
Yes.
what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yes.
So where's the
I think it's
balance? Yeah.
I think again, I think if you go look at the core line of it, I think it's almost more pointed towards areas where you're already good at. So I don't think you should do something that you're only passionate about. I think it's a dumb idea. I think there's a lot of people that wants to go do something, but they're either not great at it, or there's not a commercial upside in it. And I think just as I said, what I've said now, the other thing you need to realize is that most people enjoy what they do if they become incredibly great at what they do. Like most people find joy in the art of becoming really great at something and succeeding. But what I think what the quote more refers to is to areas where you are already good. So, I think to put it in perspective is like I cum laude my degree, but I don't feel strong in audit. Like I'm good at it, but it drained me, right? So I think in that sense, that quote applies because you don't want to go do something where you are good and it drains you, right? Because that's won't last, right? I think it's actually counterintuitive, but I think you have to actually be able to become good at something to do it because otherwise you aren't going to be adding value to it, right? So I think that question more, and I was privileged to be quite multifaceted in a few things that I performed in well, but I think like it's not a it's more deliberately asking yourself, where you want to stay on in your career and areas where you are considering between two things is to ask what makes you feel strongest, what gives you that nachas or that empowerment when you do it and you enjoy it. Um, but it's a good point you made about you got to do where your values are as well. How would you apply? Like, how did you look at those three questions that you asked? Like, what example like do you have to use, for instance?
So in terms of strengths, I think you've cracked it down. What are you good at?
Yeah.
That's basically
Yes.
it. Because, and you mentioned it, if you don't do what you're good at, you're not adding the most value you can to society.
Yes.
Like Drucker actually argues that it's a societal responsibility, that first question, because, like counterintuitively, we're always like, focus on your weaknesses. But Drucker's like, no,
No.
that's not the way.
No.
That is so counterintuitive. That's actually the path of most resistance and the path that's going to lead to the least value. And so
Yes.
that you've already cracked on. Values, I really believe that articles is the place where you're really able to find out what your true values are. So if we think about even the word values, right? I hate the way company values are portrayed. Oftentimes it's
Yes.
just words. But if you think about values though, they are things that we value. And I thought about like all of the different ones, integrity, humility, respect, etc. Not everyone values every value equally. They're all values, but it's the ones that you value most that you're going to have to look at in yourself. For an
Yes.
example, I thought about the value of excellence, which is definitely a lot of aspiring CAs, coming from a great academic background. I mean, cum laude your degree, went on to do all crazy things with your career. A lot of us are of the same ilk of wanting that excellence. Unfortunately, there's a price. Because values are so
Yes. There's a
valuable, there
compromise to
is a cost.
anything. Yes. There's a.
Exactly. And the cost of excellence oftentimes is tolerance. You cannot tolerate anything less, or I guess that gets a little bit toxic, but you don't tolerate, for yourself at least, less than excellent. That's how you feel. And so you're not going to be this person that says, no, I am myself, self-acceptance, a lot of the what happens on online, like you hear all of that woo-woo sort of, oh, love yourself
Yes.
type of conversation. Yes, that's for
Yes.
people who value tolerance, but
Yes.
in excellence, there really is no space for
Yeah.
that. So in my mind, articles is that first time where you get to really see what are your values. But
Yes.
the problem that people have is that they never start asking even before they get there. So I think you have
Yes.
to ask what are your values before you get to the firm, so that at least you're testing out what are your values in the right environments, the environments
Yes.
where you won't be working against your true self. So for an example, if you really value structure, if organization and just box like clear cut thinking is something that you value, don't go to a huge corporate that's very, very stiff and that's very bureaucratic,
Yes.
right?
No, no, I
Those are
get
things that
you.
people value, So, but
Yes.
that's the type of question you need to ask before. How do you work? I think
Yes.
you only experience that at a firm, and you'll find that out. Like you, for an
Yes.
example, you found out, I'm sure, about a lot of the ways that you are going to be a leader.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, let's actually quickly go into your experience at VAT-IT, which is incredible, starting up that one company. Can you walk us through
Yes.
the whole story?
So I actually was, and I think this is a very good point for people to sort of recognize is in the first 2 weeks that I was at the company, hardly clean, like literally as a first year, the CEO had like a meeting with us, just to sort of share vision and like what he stands for and like leadership meeting, and they included all the tops into it. And I think afterwards he sort of mentioned a lot of things or his opinions on things, and then he sort of under his breath at the end of it said, "But yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear from you guys, and if you ever have any questions or don't agree with me, let me know." And I actually took it like to heart because he said like send me a mail, and I sort of went and like before ChatGPT, but I sort of drafted this mail being like, "You say you don't read books. I disagree with you. I've read. What? How could you not learn something from
Sure.
good to great? Like, how can't you like just but not in a like in a well copyrighted way where I was sort of pointing out things that I didn't agree with him. I sort of just almost bounced eh, topics that he mentioned, wanted to have further explanation of it, and I just sort of the meeting was at 12 on a Friday, and again, I work for a Jewish tech company, so the Sabbath starts at like 5 or 6. You can't send anything after that, and then like spend an hour and a half on that, boom, and I send it through because again, like he's like
Sure.
he asked for it, so I was sort of it's a no-brainer to do. And I think he then replied and said, I must come see him. When you go see him, told him I've done a week of like fin control. It's very boring. This is not what I signed up for. My articles. He laughed, pointed me to like a small room and said, these people are going to help start a new business in the group. I'll tell your article manager you're moving. So my only theoretical real rotation was 2 weeks into my articles, where I rotated into sort of this sort of R&D space where we're going to build out an e-commerce vertical within the group under a few very, very smart chartered accountants. I remember sitting there and like 3 of the 4 in the room was number 1 in ITC or APC, and I thought, like,
Sure.
I mean, there's only 10 in the last 10 years that was number 1.
Sure.
How is 3 of them sitting here next to me, you know?
Sure.
So, but it was a very cool opportunity learning from, and it was young here. It's not, not like probably 4, 5, 6 years older. But yeah, that's how I sort of got into this like really cool opportunity to help build out a business in my articles. And I think once the opportunity came and the business started really growing, it was sort of hard to rotate me out of the business because of the sort of stickiness and just like, when you've done something that's only 6 months old and you've been there 6 months, you know more than everyone else. So it sort of was hard to remove things. And I think that led to a very fortunate and like favored articles where I got to travel to New York, Vegas, LA, like London, Europe, all over for work as a sort of lighty in his 20s that's just there as a second year article, but sort of taking on a position in a sales group and stuff. So, I think a lot of your groundwork and just your basics, your professionalism and stuff is what I picked up there. And yeah, I was quite lucky.
Groundwork and basics. There's one specific groundwork skill that you were cultivating there, which we'll get into later, hiring. But I want to actually ask, what other groundwork skills, attitudes, competencies did you gain other than just that basic professionalism, learning how to email, learning how to approach things in a professional manner?
I think so much. I think like top of head, if I can keep it to one, is I think like simplified reporting. And I think just like understanding what when you're dealing with a CEO of a business, and I sort of found myself in a situation similar, is like, don't go over complex an Excel sheet when I actually want 5, the KPIs and sort of like it almost needs to be able to be drawn up on a napkin because, you're not worried about like how much leads you caring about conversion so I think that just simplified and like clean, like reporting so that decision making can be done was sort of, I'd say, one of the top ones that I learned.
I can empathize. What's the word? I can relate to that so much because, like, what my mentor, he has this thing called candid feedback where he puts you in this frame where he's going to give you honest advice, right?
Yes.
And he believes that professional growth doesn't lie in mostly positive feedback. Mostly it's just not.
No.
Like 90% of professional
Yes.
growth, it's all in the negative or constructive feedback. And he gave me this constructive feedback, this candid feedback. And one of the things that I had lacked in my approach in the podcast was my simplicity. Because if you actually empathize now with a CEO, right? If you really think about it, they don't have time. They have 1,000 things on their plate, so their minds are just already full. So they need simplicity. They need convenience. They want people to give them, like, it has to be like value. It has to be value packed every
Yes.
single interaction, especially if you're like some students, for an example.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to empathize with anyone that you're giving value to, because if you don't, you give it to them in your way, and that's not the way that adds
Yes.
value to them. You have to give it to them in their way. Simplified reporting.
Yes.
That's a huge one. So, also, regarding hiring. I actually was really, really curious
Yes.
because I saw this one quote by Simon Sinek, and he was talking about why. So young people, this is probably in the US, it could be
Yes.
here. I don't really know about the culture of jobs in South Africa yet, but they will ask for a raise or feel entitled to ask for a raise. Um, when they, and they'll basically say, I've been working for a year or however long, same time as like that guy who's been here for 5 years, and I'm doing the same work, I'm doing probably better than him. And the reason why Simon Sinek was like, no, you don't deserve a raise yet, per se, is because that guy, he has been through the storm. Because that person's been here for a long while, they know when how to operate, and I know that they can operate when the storms are about, and they know how to hoist the mainsail in that stormy, tumultuous time. I don't know if you can.
Yes.
You might just leave when it's
Yes.
bad. It even gets into that idea that you talked about. Remember you mentioning the World Cup test, but
Yeah.
we're not going into that. Also, there was this bit of hiring advice from, I think it was Reid Hoffman, who's the author of Blitzscale, one of the founders of
Yeah.
LinkedIn, also one of the PayPal mafia. And this one thing that Uber did, which is so crazy, when Uber's just high growth, they're just growing and growing and growing and
Yeah.
getting into different countries at such fast paces. They literally, in their hiring, they ask the person that they've hired who's good and they've vetted, they like, okay, this
Yes.
guy's a good person, they've done an interview. They ask them, who are the three other best people in your organization? They hire them without even looking, which is such an interesting thing. What is your hiring philosophy? How do you go about it, having already been through that process? Scaling the startup at VAT IT from like 5 people to 100 people plus. How do you go about hiring?
I think it's such an important topic, and it's so important for to be like so like careful, because you some like when you need someone the most is when you are going to romanticize candidates the most for a role, because you really want that person to fit in because you need someone. So I think like biggest lesson, and I've learned this so hard over the last year, is just to pre-hire for what's coming. It's so important, because I think it is so sometimes like I think the biggest thing in life is acting on your gut. I think it's so important to be realistic and be like, sometimes we overcomplicate a MPV or a calc to figure out something we really actually know. We know, and I think that's where, for me, I think where you can, to try, like, just try realizing hiring maybe a little bit sooner than needed. A big lesson. I think like I've seen it happening in the last. Well, I mean, I'm saying this, yet I've also managed to flop it this last year. So it's not as if I'm an expert in this front, but I think it's important. I think when it comes to hiring, I think it is the people in your business is what builds the actual business. And I think like when you are looking for people, I think that mentality of if you have someone. So I remember my boss always said, like, he doesn't lie awake about C players. So he says, life, you get three. You get A players, B players, and C players, right? He says, A players is the top 5 or top 10%. B players is is the rest of the, like, sort of a next 60%. And then your C players is like your bottom 30%. Like it's different in different jobs. I think engineering, it's like less wider, and retail, it's probably much easier to spot, bad and good talent. But he said what lies you awake is not C players, because they just get worked out if you have a okayish culture or anything really. Like C players won't keep up. So they're not really there to destroy your business. They pump momentum. You lose, obviously. There's a lot of opportunity cost of having them in the business, but they'll work themselves out if you have good people. I think the biggest problem in life is B players, and that's what I actually would say I agree with as being most fearful, is people that is just actually average. And I don't mean there's certain roles where average, like, someone that has to just do customer service. Like, you could still be someone that's excellent at that, like a really like incredible at caring and stuff, and that makes you good in that role. So I'm not talking here about like if you're a CA or engineer or a retail staff member. I'm talking about like how you perform in your work and how passionate you are about what you're doing. And I think the biggest problem in life is people that can sort of, and I mean, you probably know quite a few CAs articling that's literally just there to take, to find any way necessary to do minimum required to be like meeting expectations, right? And I think that is the biggest, that's people you want to keep as far away as your business as possible because they just, um, they actually bring your A players down. But what you've said about, and you probably, that would be my advice, is if you have someone world class or fantastic, the people they think are fantastic is highly, highly, highly likely, if not almost 100%, also fantastic. So that strategy of hiring fantastic people and hiring the people around them, can't agree more.
You had this incredible quote from your application or your running
Yeah.
for the Rhodes Scholarship.
Yes.
Can you share us with that? Can you share with us that quote and why why you believe it?
So I think obviously for South Africa, at least I believe I'm driven by purpose. So my belief is that I am not on earth to just like work and die. I sort of believe in that I'm called to sort of serve as someone. I'm at the moment, I'm lucky that I'm the guy in charge of running Old School, which is actually a vehicle. So Old School is a vehicle to do good and give back. It's that again. That's technically what a business is. It creates purpose for others, right? And then it got the ability to sort of help in the community. And I think once you realize just how powerful businesses are, like, and just what, how much problems they cure. You know, I think the biggest problem for a mom that's crying is because her son doesn't have a job. Get the son a job, get him happy, family happy, right? Like, so I think poverty and like
This
people
is the
that
quote,
don't
guys.
have purpose, yeah. But I think all I say is I think the biggest disease in Africa isn't like anything but poverty. You know, I think it's literally the biggest disease is poverty and entrepreneurship is the cure. It is, and I think it's the more I see just what a great economy we actually have and how much opportunities they have, the more I realize like, you know, I think having worked abroad and sort of seen a lot, I think it's so important to realize that half of the CAs and engineers, if not more, is like flooding over to the UK or the Netherlands to sort of
Yeah.
go and get a golden passport or just to try and get life experience or save money. And I think if there was ever a time to do entrepreneurship in South Africa, you know, half of your peers left, like if not more, and they're usually the like the which is weird. It's the like quite the top performing ones that are leaving as well, right? So it sort of leaves you over with really much more opportunities to be in business because the sort of percentage of intellectual capital that are moving abroad is getting higher, which means your chances of building a business more likely to succeed.
I really love that, man, because I think I'm also a big believer that even when you, so you your purpose, you say you're purpose driven, but I also think everyone else is, and
Yes,
that that person that you mentioned, that example, who didn't have the job, that's a person without purpose. A job gives
yes,
purpose. Like we think, you know, it's all about money, right? And I have a very maybe controversial take on this, that I believe money is literally nothing. And actually, let me just explain that, right?
yeah,
Money literally means nothing. And it's funny, I'm like, I'm a finance and accounting student. But if I had in
yeah,
my hands two things, right? And you
yes,
could have any one of these two things. In my left
yeah,
hand, I've got 10 million rands, right?
yeah,
And in my right hand, I have a pair of shoes. Let's call it freedom of movement,
yes,
because I know you have freedom of movement.
yeah,
So I've got a pair of shoes in my right hand and 10 million rands in my left hand. Which one would you choose if you can't spend the 10 million rands?
Yeah, exactly.
Which one would you choose?
Exactly.
The shoes. You see.
Yeah.
You choose the shoes because money means nothing. It's the things that money can buy. And in a case of a job, yes, you get remunerated with the money, but also what you get is purpose. I think there's purpose behind a job.
Yes.
And there's if the money means you can feed your family, that's purpose. And
Yes.
it's so beautiful the age that we live in now in entrepreneurship. I mean, we've got macro indicators potentially backing us. We just need ESCOM to pull through, and which are
Yes.
big things. But we need a few of these things to come around. You know, the telecoms and the
Yes.
internet of Africa to build the infrastructure. But you've literally got the youngest population in the world.
Yes.
Literally, birth rates are declining in most places. The US
Yes.
declining, UK declining. You know, in a lot of these first world countries,
Yes.
and you've got the youngest population, you've got the talent here. If you look back at the baby boomer period back in the 1960s, 50s, that was the boom, baby boomer, of the US. It was population.
Yes.
Yes, there were a few other things. Obviously, the US had great infrastructure on the back of it from the 1800s growth and the early 1900s growth. But that's what we're about to enter into. So even Africa's also, it's got a great 50-year, let's call it even 20 to 50-year business case. So if you're an investor, if Africa can get, if let's look at South Africa, guys. If South Africa can get that infrastructure thing down, like this is where you want to have
Yeah.
your chips. This is where you want to have
No,
your
we can.
chips.
If we like, I think if that alliance party can just keep growing, and I think if we can if we can have an ethical like government making just the just the tax money use case to our best of our advantage, like if we've got so much to do, and I think like people that want to be see the half glass empty, you can go anywhere else and go see the glass half empty because I think there's a glass half full. Yeah, to look at.
So this is an interesting sort of like segment where I've found these journal prompts of Morgan Housel. He's
Yes.
the author of The Psychology of Money. I want to ask you them. It's
Yes.
about 5 questions,
Please.
and you're gonna pick one. So you're gonna think about all of them because I think they're just such incredible introspective like questions. But you're gonna pick one to answer for aspiring CAs. You got it?
Okay. Yes.
Cool. So let me just get them here. The first one. Okay. What do you confuse, or rather, what do you think is ambition, but that is actually envy? That's the first one. It's a bit of a tough one. Don't think you're going to share that one. It's a bit of a hard one. That's the first one. What do you believe the most with the least amount of evidence of it being true? Who has the right answer, but you ignore because they're a bad communicator? What is partially true, but you believe in it so absolutely and take it so seriously that you've turned it into a dangerous belief? And the last one, what do you think is a universal truth, but is actually just a norm unique to your own culture?
So I think so. I must just go with that the first one that resonates, like, is that how it works? Okay. I
Exactly.
think the one you said, the one that you think that I believe so much that it's almost detrimental, is the second last one. What's that? Just reread the second last one.
No, not that one. What is partially true, but you believe it so
Yeah.
absolutely and take it so seriously that you've turned it into a dangerous belief?
I think I believe compound execution,
Sure.
like has such a ripple effect on your growth as a business or in personal life or in anything just because I sort of compare it to compound interest. And I think like, I mean, anyone that looks at that would know what a wonderful curve that is. And just actually what the difference in the like present value or the future value is depending on where you start, right? And I think with compound execution, I take it sometimes maybe so at heart that I'm so, I wouldn't say rushed, but so execution driven and so purpose driven. And I sort of, we created a culture around that, that we probably don't take enough time to breathe because I'm so obsessed with the fact that I believe like making decisions, growing, like doing things now compared to doing them in September feels to me like an eternity, not like 8 months, if I can put it that way.
Sure, that gets into an idea that I mentioned the book earlier. Stephen Bartlett wrote in his book, The Diary of a CEO, 33 Laws of Business and Life. These guys they're tired of me quoting this book. But one of the rules was you must sweat the small stuff. So he mentioned how in one of his videos, at his company, it's so incredible. At the Diary of a CEO,
Yeah.
what the level of meticulousness and attention to detail that he has in his organization is such that in the bathroom, when they replace the air freshener that's there, they celebrate that and they have like a little ceremony for the person who replaced the air freshener, in the bathroom. And so most people would laugh at that. And that kind of proves that most of these small things are easy to do, but also easy not to do. And you'll find that each of those small things over time, that one day that you wasted, that turns into, another one and another one and another one. It compounds, and I love that term that you've used, compound execution. It compounds against you. Just like how compound
Yes.
execution can work for you, compound inaction can work against you, which is such a
Yes.
powerful thought. Also, there was this other quote. This is another introspective one, specifically on your time at Old School, because I know it's a high growth entity. It really is just growing like nothing that a lot of people have ever seen. And there was this quote by Haruki Murakami, who's a Japanese writer, that went like this: "And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in." That's what the storm's about. Can you share with us one storm? Because there's been 1,000 storms over the past few years. Can you share with us one storm in the growing of Old School that you've experienced and how it changed you?
So I think the the one that was obviously the most noticeable was when last year we were about to open our like first flagship store at Stellies, and we got a letter from SA Rugby to say, we are actually suing you for infringement and sort of don't really open your doors type of mentality. And I think like we just spent close to 2 million on just the shop front at Stellies because we wanted to be like epic, and it's a lot of money for us to just sort of sit and be like, oh wait, we've got another 8 kiosks that's also opening in the next month that we already paid or like we already invoiced for. We can't really back down. I think it was very hard for me in that period to think about the future of the business because I sort of went into survival mode in the storm. But I think something it taught me, and I think it's a really important lesson for entrepreneurs, and I think it's something that if you go study most like entrepreneurs that became successful, there's a lot of luck involved, but there's a level of persistence and like not stopping, not taking no for an answer. in different shapes and forms. You know, I think I'm more an extrovert, so I vocally will keep following up till I get an answer. But I think just some others is like persistence and like keeping your head down and like having a positive outlook out of a bad scenario. It's very important.
Sure, that is huge, man. I would argue, though, that that's not a very new lesson for you. So persistence. I have a theory that persistence is it's definitely I think a key to all success in life. There's no such thing as a truly successful person who hasn't persisted through all those no's, all that rejection, all those setbacks. I don't think anyone who's successful doesn't have that. But my theory is that those people have evidence that their persistence will lead to success. They have the evidence, it's written in them. They believe it. And in other words, most people don't believe, they don't have the intrinsic belief that their persistence will lead to success. And this is my theory. And that's why they don't go past the first no. And so, which actually gets into another question that I wanted to ask. What would you say, if you agree with my theory, what would you say was that first confirmation for you in your like, if you can go back to like even your childhood maybe, that was the evidence that when you persisted, this would equal success? Because I know you've experienced that in like your sales job, in your sales experience at Bad IT.
I think I'm fortunate to have been like, and I don't think I've got good examples of people that worked with me, or in my teams, or just in other teams that it developed over time. I think I was actually quite born. I was a very like I've never been good at taking no for an answer, so it's hard for me to reflect because it's sort of since it's one of those things that I have in my DNA. It's like when someone says, "Don't step over this line," I want to know why, and I want to know, and I might want to do it, or I would want to do it. So I think that is something for me that I've obviously had more, almost more like sort of that it was a natural skill. Or I wouldn't even call it skill because sometimes people don't really see it as a skill. But it is something that I like. I mean, I think that's a nurture versus nature, and where the nature argument in that circumstance would take the cake.
I hear you. I hear you. I still have to explore it, although I do think you can change, even though it was nature for you. I think that people can nurture it because I wasn't. I've
No,
become
I
more
believe you can
persistent.
nurture it. No. I think you have to nurture it. I just think my first example per se is more a nature cause than a nurture because I didn't have
I
like a
see.
turning point.
I see.
Where I think for you or others, there might have been like a wait, they said no, and I asked and I remembered vividly, and I have conviction now in that. That's more what I mean.
No, I hear you. I hear you hundreds. But in any case, guys, no does not mean never. Just to make that clear. Can we actually also, in closing, or just as a last
Yes.
thing before we officially close, can we also just walk through your plans for old school? Because I think it's incredible that you've turned a suit into a shirt that we can see right there. Guys, am I pointing at it right now? Wait, is it like yeah, there. He's literally now wearing a Springbok branded old school golf, guys. Like it's amazing that you've managed to turn it into this amazing success. What are the plans now? Because I believe it's you said in a previous podcast that you know partnerships can become 1+1 = 3. Some can become one plus
Yes.
one equals -3 because it just doesn't work.
Yes.
I think this is 1+1 = 1,000. What are your plans now that you can share publicly
I
with us?
think I think we I think what's quite hard is I think the next step is really like a maturing phase for us, which isn't always the sexy part. It's sort of making sure that we've got the right people and the right seats on the bus and the right systems and the right. So I think there's a lot of consolidating at the moment happening, but with a lot of compounding speed because we need to keep growing. I think what our our long-term view is, and our ambition is that I think the supporters narrative to our brand makes association almost a thing that comes easy for us because, just as we sell Bishops and Michael House and St. Andrews and Uffy's jerseys now, when you go to the UK and you put a Eton or a St. Paul's logo on it, or, if you start selling Liverpool merch or Manchester United merch, it sort of transcends our brand and we focus on building great product in a licensed space that can be cross-cultural, cross-language barriers, which I think a lot of brands that's growing in South Africa, their scalability to move abroad is hard because your customer base doesn't know your product and you need to first build your brand. Where I think we want to almost focus on building a brand that's known for quality rather than for our logo, So we almost want to become the premium swing tag brand around association. And I think that's the plan, is I think it's got a model that we need to perfect in South Africa, because this is our playground. We are fortunate that our brand, Old School, is known here, right? Because people know of us, they know our story, they've known our products. But I think we've taken quite a mentality shift towards what our sort of more long-term ambitions is to be a South African-based and operated business with a global footprint of retail and e-commerce. I think if in 3 to 5 years time, Old School doesn't have a wider sort of dollar or foreign currency revenue than our local side, then I think I would be sad, because I think that's the ambition, is to build a foreign revenue, like rand overhead business in the long run. I think for now it's an incredible, exciting opportunity. And I think it's that sort of focus which needs to be now on our market. And I think we've got such incredible opportunity to build out with the football and rugby side this year.
Yeah.
So it's sort of all on those focuses. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But I think we've got I've got like a 5-year plan and a 1-year plan. We don't really know the rest yet. So, yeah.
I think that's.
But thank you, Alunga. It's so nice being here, and thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Dude, I think it's incredible just what you're doing. Literally, your steps are gold for aspiring CAs. I really do believe that. Literally, just you walking like that, just looking, just seeing the compound execution in action and seeing it in fruition, seeing what gold it can actually produce, green and gold, is incredible. Dan, as a last absolute closing remark, if you could go back to first year, second year, or high school, Dan, what would you tell him?
I think it's obviously cringe, but I do think like never stop dreaming and never stop like being ambitious. I think like I hope I could be a story of inspiration for other like young 20-year-olds, because I think I also always felt, like I remember me and my one friend, Bert, we always had to have this like 3-year goals. We want to have this size business when we were 23 and then 25 and then 27. And like, I never knew how I would accomplish it. Like, I didn't try and reverse engineer my goals. I rather just had big, dumb, ambitious goals, and I went for it. And I'm fortunate that it hopefully proves that it's possible. And I think if you work hard and if you're ambitious, and I think it's so important to leverage your network. I think what you're doing with this podcast is a great example of it. But, I think you've got such opportunities, and it's so much easier to give yourself that career and like sort of ladder platform by just taking chances of reaching out. I've never heard of someone that, once they've had a meeting with a CEO or they were part of a meeting, where I promise you, just like taking that initiative and sending feedback or saying thank you or like just going that extra mile will differentiate you between the 99 others that are also doing their 8 to 5, you know. But I would just tell them to keep dreaming and never be scared of being bold and like of taking chances. You know, I think your articles is a great time and your studies are a great time to do like more than one thing. And I think it's an exciting journey.
Dream. It's the time when you have the
Yes.
blessing of youth and ambition. You have an unbeatable combination to actually maybe achieve it. So don't stop dreaming, guys. If not already, please, please follow this, subscribe. This will be on YouTube potentially. But yeah, thank you so much, Dan. I hope it does not end, but that it begins in CASA. Daneel, thank you, man.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it.